Once again, welcome to Sahara TV. With us in the studio today, we have Mr. Gbenga Komolafe, the General Secretary of the Federation of Informal Workers Organization of Nigeria. It's a pleasure having you on Sahara TV, sir.
Thank you very much.
We're looking at the emergence of the leadership of the Ninth National Assembly. There's been a lot of jostling for the leadership role, position by the ruling party, who has emerged as the majority party in the National Assembly. The question on the minds of Nigerians: what kind of leadership, or what are the expectations of the kind of leadership that Nigerians need at this point in time?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's important to actually contextualize a discussion around the leadership of the National Assembly. To say that the legislative arm of government in any democracy actually is a very important institution, and that fortunately, historically, it has been the most, it has been always on the first line of attack. Each time the soldiers interrupt the democratic process, it's always been the legislature that gets suspended. Even though you still have somewhat of an executive, now considered by the military government, you still have the judiciary functioning, but the legislature gets suspended. And that seems to have actually cut short a process of maturation for that arm of government. And I think that actually might explain the kind of crisis that has bedeviled the legislative arm of government, especially since 1999. It's always been, particularly under the Obasanjo government, it was the most beleaguered institution with the constant changes we had of the leadership. I think we had about 4 or 5 Senate presidents under Obasanjo. And we also had almost a similar story with the House of Representatives, with all manner of scandals, and subsequent assemblies have fared much better. But the shenanigans surrounding the emergence of the leadership has always been very controversial. And of course, the emergence of the leadership of the 8th Assembly was particularly controversial. We all know the story surrounding how Senator Saraki emerged, and the supposed controversy around betrayal of disloyalty around, along party lines, the cross-carpetings, and so on and so forth. So that's one aspect to the issue. I think the other aspect also is the fact that the legislation, unfortunately, especially in the more recent times, it has been populated by Nigerians whose interest might not exactly tally with popular expectations. We've had, as part of members of the National Assembly, drug dealers. A member of the National Assembly was actually convicted of drug dealing at some point. A lot have also been mired in all manner of controversies. And that has kind of affected, of course, the quality of legislations that we have had. There seems to have been so much preoccupation on the largesse that were accrued to members of the National Assembly, while critical issues of development have suffered serious neglect. There have been expectations that the National Assembly will have done something about the structure of the Nigerian state, the nature of the Nigerian Federation, the clamor for fiscal federalism, devolution of more powers to the states and local government, and even the nature and the nature and content of local governance, which has terribly suffered under the present democratic dispensation. All these are some of the issues that people have expected the National Assembly to deal with, but which unfortunately have not really been seriously addressed, especially by the last National Assembly. So again, that background, I think the expectation now will be that, especially since the ruling party now has an overwhelming majority in both arms of the National Assembly, the expectation will be that they will have an each free process of selecting their leadership, and also be able to actually set an agenda before the leadership that will at least correspond to some reasonable extent with the expectation of most Nigerians. So our expectation is that at least they will address some of these critical issues, and actually, and I hope also, I hope it won't be too much also to expect that the National Assembly will address the issue of compensation, the opacity that has characterized compensation of National Assembly members since '99. What a senator or House of Reps member earns seems to be subject of speculation. Various amounts of figures that are very outrageous in terms of, the kind of amounts we have had have been mentioned, and there has been no serious attempt to address this issue, to make sure that the cost of running the assembly itself does not consume most of our meager earnings. So these are some of popular expectations before the Ninth Assembly.
There are fears that the mistakes of 2015, for example, Mr. Reates ugly head in the next, in the 9th National Assembly. As it is now, there is a crisis even within the leadership. Just yesterday, Senator Ndume came out against the adoption of Ahmed Lawan, Speaker, as the Senate President, when he also had, the interest of becoming the Senate President. And we also still have others jostling for the position. For example, the wife of Tinubu, Ahmed Tinubu, and Remi Tinubu also has a certain interest in becoming the Deputy Senate President. Before we go into the zoning arrangement, as a matter of fact, the question is, are there concerns that we could have a repeat of the party, APC, the ruling party, making the same mistake which they did in 2015? Because the issue has always been internal party discipline, this loyalty. This has always been an issue. Do you see that really? Happening?
Well, in the natural order of things, the leadership of the National Assembly naturally should should attract a lot of jostling. The office of the Senate President is the most powerful one, and even the Speaker, and so naturally every other person in the National Assembly should want to be in the leadership. So that shouldn't be a surprise. I think what is actually a problem is perhaps the nature of political parties we have, especially the dominant political parties. You have parties that whose leading members find it very easy to cross carpet, move from one party to the other as it suits their purpose. You remember Saraki was in PDP, then he became APC, and then after his emergence as Senate President, he became PDP again, and so on and so forth. I think that's a problem that perhaps this time will be less pronounced, because the ruling party is not desperately in need of having to have some form of compromise with the leading opposition party. Neither does he have to, indulge in all sorts of willy-dealing to attract people to get a majority and so on and so forth. They are better positioned this time to have an age-free process of electing or selecting their leaders in the National Assembly. Be that as it may, given the nature of the Nigerian state and the contradictions around ethnicity, religion, and all of that, I think they also still need to be careful to ensure that there's some sort of balancing. If the president is Hausa Fulani and the vice president is a Yoruba, I would expect that there should be some concessions to some other parts of the country in determining who becomes eventually the leaders of the two arms of the National Assembly.
Yeah. Sorry to cut short. I mean, Section 43 of the Nigerian Constitution, as amended, creates, requires a federal character as far as the reflection of governance and government is concerned. And considering internal party politics, do you see this coming to play in this instance as far as zoning arrangement is concerned, based on your analysis?
Given that constitutional provision and the grim reality of the underdeveloped, what I would call the underdeveloped nature of Nigerian politics, which is still driven by primordial considerations over and above merit, I think that will be a major consideration. I will be surprised if Senator Tinubu emerges, for instance. I think that would be bad politics on the part of the ruling party for many reasons. The fact that not just that she'll be coming from APC, I mean from the same part of the country as Vice President Osibajo. She will also be coming from the same faction of the APC. I mean, you remember the APC itself was an agglomeration of different political parties. The Buhari party, CCP or CPC, the ACN, the ANPP, and all of that. So I don't think it will be good politics to allow that to happen. So I think there will be some deference to those historical considerations, ethnicity and religion, which is really unfortunate in the sense that by now we will expect that we will gravitate towards a merit-driven process, a process that will give credence to capacity and ability over where you come from, your religion, what you look like or whatever. But like the American would say, it is what it is. So.
It is what it is. That's quite unfortunate. Yeah. But at what point in time should Nigerians, I mean, the senators, members of the National Assembly, at what point should they begin to look at, issues of leadership beyond the primordial sentiment, just like you said, and then looking more into meritocracy?
That will happen. when Nigerians begin to insist, when Nigerian working people, I think one should make a distinction when we talk, because I mean, Nigerians are also not very homogeneous in terms of social and class composition. But when the overwhelming majority of the working people of this country realize that the democratic process is supposed to represent their interests, supposed to aggregate their interests, and that they have resources within the democratic process to whip those who find themselves in position of leadership into line. Until we have Nigerians coming to that awareness, we may continue to have to live with this reality of extremely backward kind of politics.
But what should be done to create more consciousness?
Active citizenship. Active citizenship.
Considering what happened in though, I mean, many have actually condemned the last election. Some have called it a joke, based on the horrific nature of it. I mean, are Nigerians themselves not really very conscious enough in how to have this awareness?
Nigerians, I think Nigerians are conscious enough. I think the problem is they are not organized enough around their fundamental interests to actually challenge some of these problems. When you look at the last election, you will see a large dose of abstention. I mean, most people actually didn't come out to vote. And that itself, I was making that observation at some other forum, that if some kind of political movement had actually called for an election boycott, such a call could have been more effective than what we had. You have states like Lagos where you have over 6 million with PVCs and you have less than 1 million actually coming out to vote. We represent perhaps about 20% of, I mean, that itself calls into question the quality of that process, because it means that the people are not there. And we are talking about democracy, which is supposed to be about the people, about governance that reflects the will of the people. And 80% of Nigerians are not even, of potential voters are not even coming out. Then, of course, we want to even challenge the credibility of that kind of democracy. But we also need to analyze why people boycotted the process. From my own point of view, I think it's a reflection of the fact that Nigerians could not see their interests represented by most of the dominant parties. Several of the smaller parties, to the best of my knowledge, I know some that I would say actually represent or aggregate those interests, but unfortunately lack the resources to be heard. So if Nigeria didn't even have the benefit of hearing you, of seeing you, of knowing what you have to offer, then of course they will not be in a position to make a decision whether to come out for you or not. So because of the heavily monetized character of our politicking, so you need so much millions to feature in a few minutes adverts in the major electronic media, for instance. So how many of the smaller parties could afford that? You need so much millions to even do mere advertorials in the major newspapers. And so if you cannot consistently match the dominant parties, at least to some extent, in appearance in the major media, then of course that means Nigeria will not be able to hear you. Nigeria will not be able to avail themselves of the opportunity of hearing alternative views and programs, different from what was being expressed by the dominant parties. So it was just PDP, APC on the airwaves, and people couldn't see their interests represented by those dominant political, what some people would call political cabal. And so it's not a surprise that most Nigerians boycotted that process. And when you look, some of my friends will even argue that the few that came out were those that were too poor not to resist the monetary inducement, because, of course, there were open vote buying across the two dominant parties. They didn't even bother to camouflage or hide it this time. So those Nigerians that were too poor to resist that came out to take their money and vote. But those who are materially comfortable enough, could, exercise a sense of dignity to say, no, I won't take your money, and I'm not going to be part of this sham. And so, when you look at that background also, you can't, very easily be able to conclude on the character of those who populate the National Assembly. And the fact that what they represent might not correspond to the fundamental interests of Nigerian working people. And to that extent, the quality of debates and output from such categories of people, personally, I'm not expecting anything fundamentally different from what we have had.
That's serious. In fact, our experience since 1999 has shown that much of the reasons for the slow progress recorded in our governance process lies in the failure of our legislators to live up to their duties of promoting good governance.
Yeah.
I mean, much of what citizens remembers, especially the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, and even the 8th National Assembly, has been chaos, political bluffing, corruption, which is particularly epitomized by budget padding. Are we saying that these are the things that we are still going to be experiencing in the next night?
Unfortunately, yes. As long as the reality remains the fact that most of the very same characters that were involved in all those shenanigans you just mentioned have been returned, and people like them also have joined them.
Exactly.
We even have we even have an imagined scenario of ex-governors.
Exactly. Who are
governors,
into retirement.
Yes.
15 ex-governors are now.
Yes. Ex-governors, most of whom have serious corruption charges on their neck, are now in the National Assembly. So it will take nothing short of a miracle to get anything meaningful out of that kind of
What does Nigerians deserve this kind of leadership?
Perhaps it has to get this bad before it gets better. The reality, the challenge, actually remains the fact that Nigerian working people are yet to be organized around their interests politically. And until that happens, we'll continue, unfortunately, continue to live with this kind of awkward developments.
In conversations with development experts who have been watching the National Assembly over the years, several themes emerged about what to watch in the years ahead. I mean, what are some of the key issues that should be put into the public domain as issues of public interest and public concern by the 9th National Assembly, from your perspective, sir?
Yeah, I think the 9th National Assembly should address itself. Interestingly, the dominant parties have also pledged to address those issues. The issues around physical federalism, the need for physical federalism, some form of restructuring, political restructuring, devolution of power to the decentralization to the states and local governments, free more resources to the local levels, and so on and so forth. We think that at the very least, the 9th Assembly should address itself to that clamor. I think the 9th National Assembly should also address the growing social and economic inequality in the country because it portends danger, not only to the stability of the country itself, but even to democracy and the institutions of democracy. We're having a situation where a few Nigerians, you can count them on your finger tips, are becoming billionaires in dollar terms, and why majority of the people are slipping back into poverty. Last year, Nigeria was dubbed the poverty capital of the world, given the reality that for the first time we recorded the highest number of poor people in the world. And when you actually situate that development against the fact that you have countries like India with over 1.2 billion people, and in Nigeria with less than 200 million, you could beat India to it. Then, you know, we are near a very tragic situation. And of course, it is not by accident that the northern parts of the country, which is obviously the most underdeveloped, because it has posted consistently the lowest development indices, human development indices over the years, also are home to serious upheavals. We know what's happening in the Northeast, the Boko Haram insurgency, and the fact that the state of Zamfara is all but sacked by people you can't even define. You don't even know what they represent. We don't even know what they want. You know, at least the Boko Haram people, we know who they are, and we can at least see their demands. But in Zamfara, we don't even know. It's open banditry, you know, and the military and government at all levels seem to be helpless to address that. For me, that actually is a reflection of growing economic and social crisis, which can be situated in the inequality. The fact that in that part of the country you have millions of people, I mean, people actually born on the street, literally on the street, and raised on the street, you know, without any stake whatsoever to society. So you have so many people. That's the part of the country where over 11 million children that have not even had the privilege of attending any form of schooling. So you have such a large pool of young minds open for recruitment by forces that we cannot even, that might even become really alien, you know, to us as a country and as a people. Some of these elements have been linked to ISIS. Some of these elements have been linked to extreme Arab insurgent interests. And they find ready recruitment among the army of the employed and completely ruthless youth in that part of the country. So it's a signal to what is to come, to what to expect in other parts of the country, if the stem of growing economic and social inequality and mass immiseration of most helpless working people continues. So we expect an assembly that purports to represent Nigerians to address itself to these issues. I will expect that the ridiculous percentage devoted to education will be addressed. We'll be posting average of 7% to education. That's about one of the lowest in sub-Saharan Africa. We've been posting average of 3% to healthcare at the federal level. Again, that's about the lowest, even by sub-Saharan African standards. Where, I mean, countries like Ghana post as much as 20%. Kenya posts as much as 20% to education. The African Union actually recommends 11% minimum for health. And a lot of African countries actually try to mix up with that, with that bar. Nigeria will be consistently posting 3%. The whole healthcare sector is absolute shambles. We expect the National Assembly, or even at the lower levels, the state assemblies, and governance at all levels to begin to address some of these critical issues.
You painted very, very gloomy pictures. I mean, are there hope? Your final thoughts on this, as a matter of fact, are there hope for helpless Nigerians in this time?
Yeah, there's some hope. There's some glimmer of hope. The last elections threw up fresh forces for the first time in the history of this country. We had a registered Socialist Party of Nigeria openly canvassing for votes. We had the AAC, which became a popular movement, especially among young people. We also have parties like NCP and so on. I think our hope lies in some of these new political forces coming together and vigorously organizing Nigerian people around a common program of development. That actually is the glimmer of hope I see. And except that happens, and very soon too, we might unfortunately be slipping very fast along the road to Somalia.
Mr. Gbenga Komolafe, thank you very, very much for your insightful analysis.
Thank you.